The way I see it, that there are two main insights from the study of moral psychology that could help a corporation or a business make people happier and more productive in the workplace. And both of these might seem a little bit obvious to you, but I think it's led to some surprising findings. So the first involves motivation. And this is the finding that in study after study, although we often say we're motivated by money and we're motivated by stuff, in reality, it's never a primary motivation. In reality, what's a lot more important than money is the perception of fairness, the perception of respect. So for instance, somebody making X dollars will be not very happy if they believe that everybody around them is making more, particularly if it's not deserved. People like making what they deserve. They like feeling that they are respected and cared for. In the end, it's not about the money, but about deeper values. And this is true more generally. So there's a lot of analysis of war, where the analysis argues, I think convincingly, that nations don't go to war for resources or money or stuff like that, but they often go to war because they feel sacred values are threatened. They go to war because for deeper moral reasons. On a more mundane scale, sometimes even symbolic gestures of respect and caring can override money. Many years ago, my wife and I were being recruited by Yale University from another university, and we were negotiating, and there were issues of where we would live and what our salaries would be and how big our laboratory space would be. And during that time, my wife gave birth to our second child. And the people in the Yale psychology department sent us a lovely bouquet of flowers. Now, a lovely bouquet of flowers costs hardly anything. We were arguing about lab spaces, which dealt with an enormous amount of money. But the symbolism, the feeling of getting that, the sign of affection and care, played a powerful role in our decision. So the first insight, I think, from moral psychology is we often overestimate how much money matters. We often think that if you paid people more, they'd be happier. If you pay them less, they'll be miserable, that people do it for the money. And I think that this is not only cynical, but it's also bad psychology. The second insight from moral psychology has to do with domains, and domains of human interaction. So psychologists and sociologists have argued that a person finds themselves in many relationships, many sorts of relationships, and these relationships have different rules. So on the one extreme, there's an exchange relationship. So think about going to a drugstore and buying some gum or some candy. Well, that's an exchange relationship. You hand over the money and you get the candy. Think about going to a restaurant or a bar. You hand over the money and in return you get food or drink. And we have a lot of our relationships work that way. But a different type of relationship is we call a more personal relationship. So if I have friends over my house for dinner and I make them a delicious dinner, and then they stand up and they say, "Thank you very much, that was delicious. We figured out, given how much you worked on it and the cost of the ingredients, here's how much money I'll give you." It'd be extremely insulted. That violates the very notion of friendship. Or think about sex. I mean, if two people have sex and then afterwards one person gets up and hands the other one a sum of money, that's a very different relationship than a sort of normal, romantic, loving one. And so we treat the world in these different ways. And normally we keep them separate. I mean, one reason why people are so appalled at prostitution is because it's typically believed to be a domain for here, a friendship, social domain, and it's being codified as an exchange domain. But then the question is, where does a workspace fall into these categories? And the answer is complicated. It depends on the workspace. It's always a little bit of an exchange relationship because people go to work and they get some sort of financial compensation or other compensation. But I think the best workplaces are such that they shift to less of a financial, less of an exchange relationship, and more of a personal, social relationship. So I think about universities that I've worked in, and the best universities are when people They don't tell people what to do, they ask favors. They feel a sense of obligation. They feel part of a broader project, and they aren't just going in for the paycheck. And there's some psychological studies that support this. Suppose you're a politician, and you could get people to work in your campaign by having a volunteer drive where they will volunteer for you, or where you could pay them. Well, you might think the volunteering is cheaper, but by paying them, you'll get better and more reliable workers. It's actually the opposite. When you pay people for something, and when they think that they're doing it for the money, they're less involved, they're less engaged, and when the money goes away, they'll go too. But if they volunteer, they feel like they're part of it, then things change. They like the project more, they work harder, they're more committed, and they stay. Now, no workplace is going to have a workplace composed entirely of volunteers. It is, again, to some extent, an exchange relationship. But I think the lessons of moral psychology suggest that just as in the first lesson, where it's not the money per se, but also perceptions of fairness and justice and respect, it's not exchange per se, but also a more complicated and richer network of social ties that make for sort of committed and satisfied people in the workplace. So I think these are two of the lessons one could pick from the modern science of moral psychology that I think have some relevance in the business world.